The jungle canopy dripped with moisture that burned like acid if it touched exposed skin. David Reeves checked his protective gloves for the third time in 10 minutes, making sure the seals held tight around his wrists. Around him, the rest of the survey team moved through the undergrowth with varying degrees of comfort. The Chitauri moved quickly on their 6 legs, their compound eyes processing threats faster than any human brain could manage. The Sauron scientist named Dr. Nasith walked upright like a human, but his scaled skin resisted the caustic moisture that made everyone else nervous. David adjusted the collection pack on his shoulders and pushed forward through a curtain of hanging vines. Each vine was thick as his arm and covered in tiny thorns that secreted paralytic poison. The expedition had lost 3 drones to these vines in the first week. Machinery died fast on Verdalis 7. Living things either adapted or joined the mulch feeding the jungle floor, which lay somewhere far below their feet in darkness nobody had successfully mapped. Amy Porter appeared beside him, her engineering scanner chirping as it catalogued another toxic plant species. She was his closest friend on this expedition. Maybe his closest friend anywhere if he thought about it. They had trained together back on Earth, both of them drawn to the kind of worlds that most humans avoided. Deathworlds, the galaxy called them. Places where everything wanted to kill you and usually succeeded. 19 new species logged today, Amy said, her voice filtered through her helmet speaker. Command is going to love this data. If we survive long enough to send it, David replied, but he smiled as he said it. The danger was real, but so was the thrill of discovery. Every plant, every creature, every microbe on this world represented something new. The galaxy was full of garden worlds where nothing surprising ever happened. David had no interest in those places. Captain Breen chittered from up ahead, his translator device rendering the sound into words. We camp here. The light fades soon. David looked up through gaps in the canopy. The local star was a dim red giant that barely provided enough light even at peak day. In another hour, the jungle would become pitch black, except for the bioluminescent fungi that glowed on tree trunks, beautiful but useless for navigation. The fungi attracted night predators who had learned that soft-skinned creatures needed light to see. The team established their portable camp on a relatively flat section of branch as thick as a shuttle landing. Dr. Nasith deployed the perimeter sensors while Amy assembled the atmospheric processor that would keep their sleeping area free of spores. David helped Captain Breen anchor the shelter fabric to the branch surface. The Chitauri was efficient but not strong. His species evolved on a stable world where nothing required physical struggle. You volunteered for this mission, Captain Breen said as they worked. It was not a question, but David heard the curiosity underneath. I did, David confirmed. Why? Your species finds this environment hostile. You require extensive protection just to avoid injury. David pulled an anchor bolt tight before answering. That's true for your species too. These suits protect all of us, but we are here for duty. Chitauri serve our hive. You chose this freely. David paused, considering how to explain. Humans like puzzles. This whole jungle is a puzzle. How does everything fit together? What can we learn? How does life find a way in conditions that seem impossible? Captain Breen's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion. You risk death to satisfy curiosity? We risk death getting out of bed every morning, Captain. At least here. The risk means something. They finished the camp setup as darkness fell like a curtain. The team gathered inside the shelter, a transparent dome that let them observe the jungle while keeping them safe. Or safer anyway. Nothing was truly safe on Verdalis 7. David ate his ration pack and watched the bioluminescent fungi begin their nightly glow. Blues and greens painted the jungle in alien colors. Something large moved past their camp, visible only as a disturbance in the glowing patterns. The sensors detected it but offered no useful data. Unidentified megafauna, the screen read. Threat level unknown. I hate this planet, Dr. Nasith muttered. The Sauron was updating his research files, his clawed hands moving quickly across a data pad. Every answer leads to 10 new questions. That's what makes it interesting, David said. That's what makes it deadly, Amy corrected. She was right, of course. 3 expeditions had attempted to survey Verdalis 7 before this one. None had completed their mission. 2 had lost crew members. David tried not to think about that too much. The next morning arrived with the same dim red light filtering through the canopy. David woke before the others and stepped outside the shelter to check the perimeter. The sensors showed green across all quadrants. Nothing had tried to breach their camp during the night. That was lucky. On Verdalis 7, luck mattered more than preparation sometimes. He was studying a cluster of fungi growing on a nearby branch when Amy joined him. "Sleep okay?" she asked. "Well enough, you?" "Kept dreaming about falling." She looked down through the gaps in the branches. "Long way to the bottom." "Don't think about it." "Hard. Not to when we're literally walking on branches hundreds of meters in the air." Captain Breen emerged from the shelter and immediately began breaking down the camp. Jithari did not waste time with morning routines. The team packed efficiently, storing everything in their carry packs. The plan was to survey the western section today, an area where orbital scans had detected unusual thermal signatures. They moved out in standard formation. Captain Breen led, his sensors constantly sweeping. Dr. Nassith followed, documenting everything. David and Amy brought up the rear, their job to watch for threats the others might miss. It was a good system. It had kept them alive for 3 weeks. The western section was different from the areas they had already explored. The branches here twisted together in complex knots that created natural bridges and platforms. Flowers the size of human heads bloomed in clusters, their petals a deep purple that seemed to absorb light. David took samples carefully, aware that beauty and danger often went together on this world. He was sealing a sample container when he heard Dr. Nassith shout a warning. David looked up in time to see them. 6-legged creatures with bodies like wolves but heads like nothing Earth had ever produced. Razor spines covered their backs, each spine dripping with venom. The pack moved fast, spreading out to flank the team. Captain Breen triggered an alarm beacon. Standard procedure during predator contact. The sound was supposed to frighten animals away. These creatures did not frighten. They attacked. Everything happened in seconds. Amy fired a deterrent pulse that caught one creature in the chest. It screamed and fell back. Dr. Nassith grabbed Captain Breen and pulled him toward a thick trunk that offered cover. David backed away from the samples he had been collecting, his hand reaching for his own deterrent weapon. The branch beneath his feet cracked. It was rotten. The sensors had not detected it because the outer layer was still solid, but the inside had been hollowed out by boring insects. David felt it give way. He dropped his weapon, trying to catch himself. His fingers found a vine, and he held on as the branch section fell away into darkness below. "David!" Amy's voice was distant, panicked. The vine was slippery. David tried to climb, but his gloves could not grip properly. He looked up and saw Amy leaning over the edge, reaching for him. Too far, he was too far down already. "Pull up. Use your winch," Amy shouted. David reached for the emergency winch on his belt. His fingers found empty air. The winch housing had broken off during the fall. He looked up at Amy's face, saw the horror there, and knew what was about to happen. The vine snapped. David fell into the darkness of the mid-jungle, the sounds of his team's shouts fading above him, until there was nothing but wind and the rushing sense of motion. He hit something soft, then something hard. Then he was rolling through layers of leaves and branches that slowed his fall but did not stop it. His helmet cracked. His suit tore. Pain exploded in his left ankle. Then he hit water. Dark, murky water that filled his damaged helmet and made him choke. David thrashed upward, broke the surface, and dragged himself onto a muddy bank. He lay there gasping, every part of his body screaming pain signals. Above him, impossibly far away, he could hear Amy calling his name. He tried to answer, but his communicator was smashed. His voice would not carry that distance. David Reeves was alone in the most dangerous part of a Deathworld jungle with damaged equipment and an injured ankle. The mid-jungle was where even drones did not survive. The team had standing orders never to attempt descent into this level. He listened to Amy's voice growing fainter as the team was forced to retreat from the predators still attacking above. Then there was silence, the kind of silence that only exists in places where humans do not belong. David checked his supplies. 1 ration pack, a small medical kit, a broken communicator that could receive but not transmit, a sample collection knife. That was everything. He looked around at the alien jungle pressing in from all sides, at the dim light barely penetrating from above, at the shapes moving in the shadows between the massive tree trunks. Then David Reeves started to laugh. It was either that or cry, and crying would not help him survive. Amy Porter refused to move from the spot where David had fallen. Captain Breen had to physically pull her back as the razor-spine predators circled closer, their venomous spines rattling a warning. She fought him, screaming David's name into the darkness below, but no answer came back except the sounds of the jungle eating itself. They retreated to a safe distance and established a crisis camp. Captain Breen immediately activated all emergency protocols while Dr. Nasseth deployed every scanning device they carried. The equipment hummed and clicked, sending sensor beams down into the mid-jungle levels. The screen showed nothing useful. The biomass was too dense, the interference too strong. It was like trying to see through a wall of static. There must be something, Amy insisted. She grabbed Dr. Nasseth's scanner and adjusted the frequency settings. We can't just give up. Nobody is giving up, Dr. Nasseth said carefully. His voice was gentle in the way that people used when they already knew the truth, but did not want to say it out loud. But we must be realistic about the probabilities. Amy wanted to throw the scanner into the jungle. Instead, she forced herself to breathe and think. David was smart. David was trained for this. David had survived worse situations during their training exercises back on Earth. Except those exercises had safety teams standing by, and medical support, and equipment that worked properly. Here they had nothing. Captain Breen finished his emergency transmission to the orbital station. They are sending an evacuation transport. It will arrive in 10 days. 10 days? Amy stared at him. David could be alive down there right now, waiting for us. The regulations are clear. When a team member is lost in a level 5 hazard zone with no confirmed vitals, we establish a monitoring post and wait for extraction. Captain Breen's translator made his words sound mechanical, but Amy heard the regret underneath them. I'm sorry. These rules exist because rescue attempts in these conditions typically result in additional casualties. Typically, Amy repeated. Not always. The survival rate for falls into the mid-jungle is 0.03%. That accounts for the possibility of equipment malfunction rather than actual survival. The numbers were like fists hitting her stomach. Amy knew statistics. She knew how the galaxy calculated risk. But David was not a statistic. He was her friend, her partner, the person who had convinced her that exploring Deathworlds was worth the danger. Over the next 3 days, Amy maintained a constant broadcast on David's communicator frequency. She spoke to him as if he could hear, as if he was just out of range, as if words could somehow pull him back from wherever he had fallen. She told him about the camp, about the weather patterns they were tracking, about the stupid jokes Dr. Nasseth made when he thought nobody was listening. She told him to hold on, to stay alive, to remember his training. The jungle answered with silence. Dr. Nasseth spent his time researching human biology. He filled his datapad with notes about Earth's evolutionary history, trying to understand the species that kept volunteering for missions like this. What he found confused him more than it explained. Your world was hostile, he said to Amy on the 4th night. True hostile, not simply challenging. Predators that hunted your ancestors. Diseases that killed entire populations. Climate shifts that destroyed civilizations. Yet humans not only survived but spread across the entire planet. We're stubborn, Amy said. She was staring at her communicator, watching the battery percentage drop another point. Soon she would need to stop broadcasting to conserve power. The thought made her feel like she was abandoning David all over again. Stubbornness is not sufficient to explain it. My species evolved as apex predators on a stable world. We never faced the selection pressures that shaped humanity. When we encountered challenges we could not overcome alone, we failed. We did not adapt. Dr. Nasseth tilted his head in a gesture that might have been admiration or might have been confusion. Humans adapted to everything. You should not have been able to do that. But we did, Amy said. Yes, you did. Which suggests that David's chances of survival may be slightly higher than the statistical models predict. It was the first hopeful thing anyone had said in days. Amy held onto it like a rope thrown to a drowning person. Captain Breen attempted 2 rescue expeditions into the upper levels of the mid-jungle. The first attempt failed when their climbing equipment was dissolved by acidic spore clouds they had not known existed at those depths. The second attempt ended when they encountered a creature that defied classification. It was 12 meters long, armored in overlapping plates and territorial in a way that made the razor-spine predators look friendly by comparison. The team barely escaped back to the relative safety of the canopy level. After the second failure, Captain Breen sat beside Amy at the camp's edge. I have to file a status report, he said quietly. The regulations require me to update David's survival probability every 48 hours. What are you going to write? The truth. That probability decreases with each day, that the environment is too hostile for recovery operations, that we have done everything possible within safe parameters. Amy looked at him. Really looked at him. Captain Breen commanded this expedition with efficiency and care. He followed every rule because rules kept people alive. But rules had never met someone like David. He's not dead, Amy said. I hope you are correct. But hope does not change the mathematics. On day 7, something broke through the atmospheric interference on Amy's communicator. Just for a moment, she heard what might have been breathing. Or it might have been wind through the jungle canopy. Or it might have been wishful thinking taking audio form. She adjusted every setting, boosted every frequency, but the sound did not repeat. Dr. Nasseth analyzed the recording and concluded it was most likely natural interference. Amy did not believe him. She increased her broadcasts, speaking faster, saying everything she thought David might need to hear. Stay hidden during the dark hours. Find water sources by watching small animals. Test plants carefully before eating. Remember the survival protocols they had drilled into their heads during training. Remember that she was waiting for him. The evacuation transport arrived on day 11. Amy watched it descend from orbit, a sleek Chitauri vessel designed for quick extraction from dangerous environments. The pilot, an officer named Trin, transmitted landing coordinates and estimated arrival at the camp by first light the next day. We will depart immediately upon transport arrival, Captain Breen announced. Pack all equipment that can be safely carried. Leave the rest. Amy packed her gear in silence. Around her, Dr. Nasseth secured his research files while Captain Breen cataloged their remaining supplies. Everything was efficient and professional. Everything was exactly according to procedure. Everything felt completely wrong. That night, Amy could not sleep. She sat at the camp's edge and watched the bioluminescent fungi paint the jungle in impossible colors. Somewhere below, in the darkness that killed everything, David might still be alive, or his body might be feeding the jungle floor, adding his molecules to the ecosystem he had been so excited to study. Both possibilities existed simultaneously until proven otherwise. She activated her communicator one final time. The battery was almost dead. This would be her last broadcast. David, if you can hear me, we have to leave tomorrow. The transport is here and we can't stay longer. I'm so sorry. I should have been faster. I should have caught you. I should have... Her voice cracked and she had to stop. After a moment, she continued. You told me once that humans survive because we don't give up. That we keep going even when the math says we should stop. So if you're down there, if you're somehow still fighting, then keep going. Keep surviving. Because I'm not giving up on you. Even if I have to leave, I'm not giving up. She ended the transmission and powered down the communicator. The jungle pressed in from all sides, full of sounds that had no names and dangers that had no solutions. Amy sat there until dawn, watching the light filter down through layers of canopy, wondering if David was watching the same light from somewhere far below. When the first red rays of the local star broke the horizon, Amy stood and turned toward the camp. She would pack her gear. She would board the transport. She would follow the regulations because that was what kept people alive. But she would not forget. And she would not stop believing that somehow, impossibly, David had found a way to survive. Behind her, the jungle continued its eternal cycle of growth and death and transformation. Nothing was permanent here. Everything was always changing. Everything was always finding new ways to exist in conditions that should have made existence impossible. Amy walked back to camp and started breaking down her shelter. Around her, the team moved efficiently through their final tasks. Soon they would lift off and leave Verdalis 7 behind. The survey mission would be marked as partially successful. David Reeves would be listed as lost in the line of duty. The galaxy would note that Deathworlds claimed another victim. And somewhere in the depths that no scanner could penetrate, in the darkness where survival was measured in hours rather than days, the truth was something different than anyone above could know. But truth, like everything else on Verdalis 7, was just another thing waiting to be discovered. Dawn on day 12 arrived with the usual red light filtering through the jungle canopy. Amy emerged from her shelter expecting to see Captain Breen coordinating their final departure tasks. Instead, she saw him standing completely still, staring at something beyond the camp perimeter. His translator was making broken clicking sounds. as if his shock had overloaded the device. Amy followed his gaze and her brain refused to process what her eyes reported. David Reeves sat cross-legged at the edge of the camp, eating something wrapped in broad leaves. He looked thinner, his face shadowed with exhaustion and something else that might have been wisdom earned the hard way. His expedition suit was gone, replaced by clothing that appeared to be woven from plant fibers and animal hide. His hair was longer, tied back with what looked like vine cord. Scars marked his exposed arms in patterns that told stories Amy could not yet read. But David was alive. David was here. David was calmly eating breakfast as if returning from a 12-day solo trip into the most lethal environment on the planet was perfectly normal. Amy's legs moved before her mind caught up. She ran toward him, then stopped abruptly when she saw what was behind him. The creature was massive. Its body would not fit inside their transport shuttle. Obsidian scales covered its form, each scale edged in deep red that caught the morning light. Its head was angular and intelligent, with amber eyes that tracked every movement in the camp. Forelegs ended in retractable claws that had carved grooves in the branch beneath them. A ridge of bone plates ran down its spine, and when it yawned, Amy saw rows of teeth designed to shear through anything that qualified as meat. This was a ridge-backed hunter. An apex predator. The expedition had cataloged exactly one specimen from extreme distance, marking it as threat level critical and recommending immediate evacuation if encountered. The creature was supposed to be territorial, aggressive, and absolutely impossible to approach safely. Yet it lounged behind David like an enormous pet, its massive head resting on the branch while it watched the camp with lazy interest. "Hello, Amy," David said. His voice was rough, like he had not used it much lately. "Sorry I worried you." Amy's mouth opened, but no words came out. Dr. Nasseth appeared beside her, his data pad slipping from his clawed hands and clattering on the branch. Captain Breen remained frozen, his weapon drawn but not raised, as if he could not decide whether the threat was real or some kind of hallucination caused by stress. "That is a ridge-backed hunter," Dr. Nasseth finally managed to say. "That is an apex predator with a kill efficiency rating of 97%. That creature should be actively trying to consume us." "This is Ripley," David said, gesturing to the massive predator with the casual tone someone might use to introduce a friend. "She's actually really gentle once you get to know her." The creature, Ripley, rumbled deep in her chest. The sound vibrated through the branch beneath their feet. Captain Breen's weapon came up automatically. David raised his hand in a calming gesture, then made a series of clicking sounds with his tongue. Ripley's rumble changed pitch, becoming something almost like a purr. She settled her head back down and closed her eyes partially. "Please do not shoot her," David said. "She's protective, but she won't attack unless threatened." Amy found her voice. "David, how are you alive?" "How are you here? How is that thing not eating you right now?" "Long story," David said. He stood up slowly, favoring his left leg slightly. "But first I brought food. Your supplies must be running low by now." He gestured to several bundles wrapped in the same broad leaves he had been using. Dr. Nasseth approached cautiously, scanning the packages with trembling hands. His eyes widened as he read the results. "This is edible. This is safe. This is actually more nutritious than our standard rations." He looked up at David with confusion that bordered on fear. "Where did you acquire this?" "I'll explain everything," David promised. "But maybe we should all sit down first. And Captain Breen, please lower your weapon. You're making Ripley nervous." Captain Breen looked at his weapon as if surprised to find it in his hands. He lowered it slowly, though he kept it powered and ready. "You have been missing for 12 days. 12 days in the mid-jungle. Survival probability was calculated at effectively 0. Explain how you are standing here." "I fell into the mid-jungle," David agreed. "Injured my ankle, damaged most of my equipment. Spent the first day in significant pain and moderate panic. Then I started paying attention to my surroundings instead of my fears." Amy moved closer, needing to verify that David was real and not some jungle-induced hallucination. She reached out and touched his arm, felt solid flesh and the warmth of living skin. "We tried to find you. We broadcast constantly. Did you hear us?" "Every word," David said softly. "My communicator was broken for transmission, but still received. Hearing your voice kept me going on the worst days. Why did you not signal your location?" Captain Breen demanded. "We could have attempted rescue." "With what?" "Your equipment can't reach the mid-jungle. You tried twice and barely survived. If you had kept trying, you would have died. David's voice was matter-of-fact, without accusation. I knew the regulations. I knew you had to leave. I was already working on my own survival plan. Dr. Nasseth was still scanning the food packages, his scientific mind struggling with the data. These plants are classified as level 4 toxins. This fungus produces paralytic spores. This meat comes from a species we designated as contaminated biomass. None of this should be safe for human consumption. Raw, you're correct, David said. But properly prepared, they're perfectly edible. Some of them are actually delicious. Prepared how? Cooking mostly. Thermal processing neutralizes most of the toxins. Some plants need to be soaked first. Others need specific preparation methods. I figured it out through careful testing and observation. Amy stared at him. You tested potentially lethal plants while alone and injured in the most dangerous jungle on this planet? Well, when you say it like that, it sounds reckless, David said with a slight smile. But I followed proper protocols. Small samples, long waiting periods, careful documentation of effects. I had time and motivation to be thorough. Captain Breen gestured at Ripley, who was now watching the conversation with obvious interest, and the apex predator. Did you also test it for edibility? Different kind of relationship, David said. He turned to look at Ripley, and the massive creature's eyes focused on him with clear recognition. I found her on the 4th day. She was injured, in pain, unable to hunt effectively. I helped her. She helped me. We figured things out together. You helped it. Dr. Nasseth's voice was flat. You approached an injured apex predator and provided assistance. She was hurt, David said simply. Pain is universal. I recognized it and responded. Amy watched the exchange and saw something shift in David's eyes. He was not lying, but he was simplifying. The full story was longer and more complex, and parts of it probably defied explanation. But the core truth was visible in how Ripley looked at David, how she responded to his voice, how she positioned herself protectively between him and the camp. Somehow, impossibly, David had not just survived the mid-jungle. He had thrived in it. He had learned its rules, found its resources, and made an ally of a creature that should have been his death. The mathematical improbability of his survival was so extreme that it stopped being mathematics and became something else entirely. We need to leave soon, Captain Breen said. He was trying to reassert control of a situation that had become completely unpredictable. The transport is waiting. We must board within the hour. David nodded. Understood. I just need to make sure Ripley can come with us. Every member of the expedition team spoke at once, their voices overlapping in a chaos of objection. Captain Breen's translator gave up entirely, emitting only squealing static. Dr. Nasseth dropped his data pad again. Amy just covered her face with her hands, caught between laughing and crying because of course David wanted to bring the apex predator with him. That is not possible, Captain Breen managed when his translator rebooted. Regulations prohibit transporting uncontained dangerous fauna. The transport pilot will refuse. Then I'll stay here until you can make other arrangements, David said. His voice was calm but absolutely firm. Ripley saved my life multiple times. I won't abandon her. You are willing to remain on a Deathworld rather than leave an animal behind. Dr. Nasseth could not hide his shock. She's not just an animal. She's my friend. And yes, I'll stay. Amy looked at David, really looked at him, and saw the changes 12 days had carved into him. He was not the same person who had fallen into the jungle. That person would have recognized the logic of Captain Breen's argument. This person, the one standing before them now, operated on a different logic entirely. He had learned something in the darkness that no classroom could teach. He had discovered what it meant to survive not through strength or technology, but through connection and mutual trust. We will find a solution, Amy said firmly. She looked at Captain Breen. We can classify Ripley as a research specimen, David's specimen captured during his solo survey. That falls under scientific expedition protocols. Captain Breen's mandibles worked silently. He was calculating risks and regulations, trying to find a path that satisfied both his duty and this impossible situation. Finally, he clicked in resignation. The transport will need modifications to safely contain a creature of that size. This will delay departure by several hours. That's acceptable, David said, and you will be responsible for managing the creature during transport. Any incidents will be your liability. Understood. And you will file a complete report explaining How you survived 12 days in conditions that killed every previous explorer who attempted similar duration exposure. David smiled. That's going to be a long report. I expect it will be, Captain Breen said. I also expect it will change many things about how we understand human capabilities. The camp transformed into organized chaos as everyone prepared for departure while accommodating a massive predator nobody had planned for. Amy stayed close to David, helping him prepare while asking questions she could not stop herself from voicing. Each answer revealed more of the impossible story he had lived. And through it all, Ripley remained calm, responding to David's voice and presence with a trust that should not have existed between human and predator. They were wrong, though, Amy realized. Predator was the wrong word. Partner was closer. Friend was more accurate. Family might be the truth. David caught her staring and smiled. I know how it looks, he said quietly. It looks impossible, Amy replied. Yeah, David agreed. It really does. They sat in a rough circle near the camp center while the transport pilot worked on modifying the cargo bay for Ripley's accommodation. David had suggested they talk while waiting, and nobody argued. They all needed to understand how the impossible had happened. Captain Breen recorded everything on his official log. Dr. Nasseth took notes frantically. Amy just listened, occasionally touching David's arm to confirm he was real. David began with the fall. The first 4 hours were the worst, he said, his voice steady despite the memory. My ankle was sprained, maybe fractured. My helmet was cracked. My suit was torn in 3 places. I was lying in mud that smelled like rotting metal, and everything around me wanted to kill me. He paused, looking down at his hands. They were scarred now, marked by the jungle in ways that would never fully fade. I could hear you calling for me. Amy, your voice came through my broken communicator. I tried to answer, but the transmitter was dead. I could only listen. That first night hearing you broadcast kept me from giving up completely. Amy felt her throat tighten. She had spoken to silence, never knowing David heard every word. I had to make choices fast. My medical kit was intact, so I treated my ankle as best I could. Wrapped it, elevated it, took the pain medication I had. Then I took inventory. 1 ration pack, some medical supplies, a sample knife, a communicator that could receive but not send. That was everything. How did you find water? Dr. Nasseth asked. I watched the small creatures. There were these little things about the size of my thumb with 6 legs and antennae. They moved in groups toward specific areas. I followed them and found a stream. The water looked clear, but I knew better than to drink it untreated. You had no purification equipment, Captain Breen noted. No, but I had fire. Took me most of day 2 to figure out how to make it. Everything on this planet is damp, so I needed to find dry material inside deadwood. Used my knife to make shavings and sparks from some rocks I found. The fire was small, but it boiled enough water to keep me alive. David shifted position and Ripley raised her head slightly, checking on him. He made a soft clicking sound and she settled back down. The casual intimacy of the gesture was striking. Food was harder. My ration pack lasted 3 days when I stretched it. After that, I had to test the local options. I started with plants because they were easier to process. Took tiny samples, waited hours, documented the effects. Most things made me sick at first. I learned which ones were safest. The plants we cataloged as toxic, Dr. Nasseth said. You consumed them. After processing, cooking changes molecular structures. Something that's poisonous raw might be safe cooked. I tested everything carefully and kept notes on pieces of bark since my data pad was broken. Amy tried to imagine David alone in the darkness, systematically poisoning himself in tiny doses to learn what was edible. The patience required was staggering. The courage was beyond measure. What about predators? Captain Breen asked. The mid-jungle is full of carnivores. I learned their patterns. Most hunted at specific times. I stayed hidden during those periods. Found a hollow in a tree trunk that was defensible, made myself as small and quiet as possible. That is when you encountered the ridge-backed hunter, Dr. Nasseth said, glancing at Ripley. David nodded. Day 4. I was at the stream refilling my water containers. I heard something large moving through the undergrowth. My instinct was to run, but running is how prey acts, so I froze instead. He looked at Ripley and something soft entered his expression. She came to the stream from upstream. She was limping badly. There was a wound on her left flank, deep and infected. She was in pain. I could see it in how she moved, how she breathed, how she held her body. You approached her? Amy could not keep the disbelief from her voice. Not at first. I watched. She drank from the stream very slowly, very carefully. She kept looking around like she expected something to attack. After she drank, she lay down in the shallow water. That's when I understood. Understood what? Dr. Nasseth leaned forward. She was trying to clean the wound. The water was helping with the pain, but she couldn't reach the injury properly. She was struggling. David paused, gathering his thoughts. I've spent my whole career studying how different species respond to distress. Pain looks similar across species. Fear looks similar. Desperation looks similar. I was looking at a creature in desperate pain and I had medical supplies that could help. So you helped an apex predator, Captain Breen said flatly. I helped someone who was hurting. I moved slowly. I made soft sounds. I kept my posture non-threatening. When I was about 3 meters away, she looked at me. Really looked at me. Her eyes were intelligent. She was evaluating me just like I was evaluating her. What did you do? I opened my medical kit very slowly. Took out the antiseptic and bandaging. I held them up so she could see. Then I pointed at her wound and then at the supplies. I did this several times. You attempted to communicate medical intent to a non-sapient predator, Dr. Nasseth said, his voice a mix of horror and fascination. I communicated caring. Intent matters less than emotion. I showed her I wanted to help, not hurt, and somehow she understood. David's voice became quieter. She let me approach. She flinched when I cleaned the wound, but she didn't attack. The antiseptic must have stung badly, but she held still. I applied bandaging designed for human injuries to an alien predator, and it worked. When I finished, she made this sound. Low and rumbling. Not aggressive. Almost like gratitude. Impossible, Captain Breen muttered, but he did not sound certain. I thought so too. I backed away slowly and returned to my shelter. But the next morning, there was meat outside my hollow. Fresh meat from a kill. She had brought me food. Amy felt something shift in her understanding of what happened. This was not just survival. This was relationship. This was communication across species barriers that should have been impenetrable. After that, we developed routines. David continued. She would hunt and share her kills. I would cook the meat, which made it safer for me, and she seemed to prefer the taste. I would check her wound daily and change the bandaging. She would guide me to safe areas and warn me about dangers. She guided you. Dr. Nasseth was writing frantically. Yes, she knew the territory, knew when the acid spores would emerge, when the nocturnal hunters would wake where the safe paths were. She would vocalize in specific ways or position her body to indicate direction. I learned to read her signals. You learned her language, Amy said. I learned to pay attention. That's different. I don't know what she's thinking, but I can read her intent, and she can read mine. We built understanding through observation and trust. Captain Breen stood and walked closer to Ripley, studying her with new eyes. The massive predator watched him but did not move aggressively. She was completely calm, confident in David's presence. This should not be possible, Captain Breen said. Chitauri cannot bond with non-Chitauri species. We lack the cognitive framework. Maybe you're looking for the wrong framework, David suggested. It's not about cognitive processing. It's about recognizing another conscious being and responding with empathy. Empathy is a human concept, maybe, or maybe it's a universal concept that humans are just better at accessing. Dr. Nasseth looked up from his notes. You are suggesting that humans possess some unique capability for interspecies bonding. I'm suggesting that humans evolved on a world where survival meant learning to read and cooperate with other species. We domesticated wolves into dogs. We partnered with horses. We learned to understand animals because our survival depended on it. That capability didn't vanish when we went to space. But Ripley is not domesticated, Captain Breen objected. No, she's a partner. There's a difference. Domestication is about control. Partnership is about mutual benefit and respect. Amy watched David speak and recognized the truth he had discovered. Humans carried something into space that other species lacked, not because humans were superior, but because Earth had been the kind of world that required multiple survival strategies. Violence was one strategy. Technology was one strategy. But empathy and partnership were strategies too, and humans had evolved to excel at them. The wound healed, David said, bringing the story toward its conclusion. By day 8, Ripley was moving normally again. She could have left, returned to her territory or her pack. But she stayed. and I stayed with her. We became a team. You taught her tricks? Captain Breen gestured at the commands David had demonstrated earlier. Not tricks, communication. I learned her vocalizations and she learned mine. Simple things mostly. Stop, come, danger, safe. We built a vocabulary between us. And you survived 12 days because of this partnership, Dr. Nasseth said. I survived because I paid attention instead of panicking. I survived because I saw an opportunity instead of only seeing a threat. I survived because a creature I was supposed to fear recognized that I was trying to help her, and she chose to help me in return. The group sat in silence, processing the story. It contradicted everything their respective species understood about wilderness survival. It suggested that human capabilities extended far beyond what galactic databases indicated. It changed the fundamental assumptions about human fragility. Amy spoke into the silence. You weren't just surviving. You were thriving. David considered this, then nodded. By day 10, I was healthier than when I started. Better food, constant movement, clear purpose. The jungle stopped being a place trying to kill me and became a place I was learning to understand. With Ripley, I felt safer than I did in camp with all our technology. Because you adapted, Amy said. Because I connected, David corrected. Adaptation is about changing yourself. Connection is about understanding what's already there and finding your place in it. Officer Trin's voice crackled through Captain Breen's communicator, announcing the cargo bay modifications were complete. Time to board. Time to leave Vertalis 7 behind and return to civilization where David's story would seem like fantasy rather than fact. But the proof was lying peacefully beside him. A massive predator who responded to soft clicks and gentle touches, who had chosen partnership over predation, who had demonstrated that the jungle's deadliest resident could become its most devoted friend. David stood slowly, stretching muscles that had adapted to constant jungle movement. Ready to go home? He asked Ripley. The great creature rose to her feet and rumbled agreement. Whatever home meant to her now, it clearly included the strange, soft-skinned being who had offered help when she was wounded, who had shared food when she was hungry, who had chosen connection over fear. Together, human and predator, they walked toward the transport that would carry them away from the jungle that had tried to kill them both and instead had taught them something the galaxy was just beginning to understand. The transport's cargo bay had been transformed into a temporary habitat for Ripley. Officer Trin had installed reinforced barriers and monitoring equipment, though he made his disapproval clear through every tight movement and clipped vocalization. The rest of the team secured their equipment while David helped Ripley settle into the unfamiliar space. Once everyone was aboard and secured for departure, Captain Breen initiated launch procedures. The transport lifted smoothly from the jungle canopy, and through the viewports Amy watched Vertalis 7 shrink below them. The world that had nearly killed David was just another green sphere now, beautiful and deadly and indifferent to whether anyone survived its challenges. They were 3 hours into the flight to the orbital research station when Dr. Nasseth approached David in the common area. The Sauron scientist had been reviewing his notes constantly, his clawed fingers tapping rhythms on his datapad. I have questions, Dr. Nasseth announced. Many questions about your survival narrative. David looked up from where he sat near the cargo bay entrance. He had positioned himself close to Ripley, maintaining their connection even through the barrier. I figured you would. You claim to have survived through observation and empathy. These are not survival traits recognized by standard xenobiology. Maybe standard xenobiology is missing something. Dr. Nasseth's tail twitched in what might have been irritation. Science does not miss things. Science documents reality, and reality indicates that soft-bodied species like humans should not survive extended Deathworld exposure without technological support. But I did survive, David pointed out reasonably. Yes, which means my understanding of human capabilities is incomplete. Dr. Nasseth settled into a seat across from David. Explain to me how your species developed these abilities. David thought for a moment before answering. What do you know about Earth? Limited data. Your homeworld is classified as a Class 4 Deathworld. Diverse biomes, extreme weather variability, abundance of large predators. Your species emerged from hostile conditions. That's the technical description, David agreed. But it misses the important part. Earth didn't just have predators. It had thousands of predator species, all hunting different prey in different ways. Early humans were prey to many of them, yet you survived to develop sapience. We survived by being adaptable. We couldn't outrun the fast predators. We couldn't overpower the strong predators. We couldn't outsense the predators with better hearing or smell. So we learned to read them, to predict their behavior, to understand their patterns. Amy had moved closer, listening. She had heard versions of this lecture during their training, but hearing David speak it after living it added weight to every word. We learned to read body language across species, David continued. Fear looks the same in a deer and a tiger. Aggression has universal signals. Pain, hunger, curiosity. All of these states produce recognizable behaviors. Humans became experts at reading these signals because misreading them meant death. Other species also recognize threat signals, Captain Breen said. He had joined the conversation from the cockpit. This is not unique to humans. No, but we took it further. We didn't just learn to recognize threats, we learned to form partnerships. We befriended wolves and turned them into dogs. We domesticated dozens of species. We learned that some animals could become allies instead of enemies. Dr. Nasseth shook his head. The Sauron domesticated pack animals for labor. This is not the same as what you described with Ripley. It's completely different, David agreed. Labor animals are tools. They're controlled through force or conditioning. Ripley isn't controlled. She's a partner. She chooses to stay with me because we've built mutual trust. But she is not sapient, Dr. Nasseth objected. She cannot make reasoned choices. She's not sapient in the way we measure it, but she's intelligent. She solves problems. She learns. She recognizes individuals and remembers interactions. She understands that I helped her when she was injured, and she reciprocated. That's not instinct. That's choice. Captain Breen made a clicking sound that his translator rendered as thoughtful consideration. Chitauri society is structured around hive intelligence. Individual Chitauri are components of a larger organism. We have no concept of interspecies partnership because we barely have a concept of individual identity. And that's fine for your species, David said, but it means you've never needed to develop the skills humans evolved. You communicate through pheromones within your hive. You don't need to read body language or vocal tones. You don't need to bridge communication gaps. What about the Sauron? Amy asked Dr. Nasseth. How does your species approach other beings? Dr. Nasseth's tail curled in discomfort. Sauron evolved as solitary hunters. We are territorial. We cooperate when necessary but do not form emotional bonds easily, even with other Sauron. The concept of befriending a predator is alien to our psychology. So both of your species see other creatures as either resources, threats, or irrelevant. David summarized. Humans see potential partners, potential friends, potential family. That is inefficient, Captain Breen said. Emotional bonds create vulnerability. They also create strength. Ripley protected me from threats I couldn't handle alone. She guided me to resources I couldn't have found. Together, we were more capable than either of us could be separately. That's not vulnerability. That's multiplication of ability. Dr. Nasseth tapped his datapad thoughtfully. You are suggesting that humans possess a unique form of social intelligence that extends across species boundaries. I'm saying we're good at making friends, even with beings that seem dangerous at first. Earth taught us that survival isn't always about being the strongest. Sometimes it's about being the most connected. The transport hummed around them as they traveled through space. In the cargo bay, Ripley shifted position, her massive form visible through the transparent barrier. David glanced back at her, and even through the separation, some communication passed between them. This changes threat assessment protocols, Captain Breen said slowly. If humans can form partnerships with hostile fauna, then Deathworld classifications become less absolute. It changes more than that, Amy added. She had been thinking while the others talked, connecting pieces. It changes how we understand human potential in the galaxy. Most species found their niche and stayed there. Earth forced humans to be generalists. We had to adapt to everything, so we learned to adapt to anything. Including us, Dr. Nasseth said quietly. What do you mean? Humans are the newest species to join galactic civilization. You had faster than light travel for less than 2 centuries, yet you have integrated more thoroughly than species that have been spacefaring for millennia. You work alongside Chitauri, Sauron, and dozens of other species with apparent ease. Because we see you as people, not aliens, David said. That's the same skill. You look different, you think different, but we recognize conscious beings and we respond with empathy. It's automatic for us. Captain Breen turned from the cockpit controls to face the group directly. This is why humans volunteer for dangerous missions. Not because you are fearless, but because you see opportunities where we see only risk. Maybe, David allowed. Or maybe we're just curious. Humans like puzzles. New worlds are puzzles. New species are puzzles. Figuring out how to survive in places that seem impossible is a puzzle we can't resist. Even when the puzzle nearly kills you, Amy said. David smiled. Especially then. The difficult puzzles are the ones worth solving. Dr. Nasseth stood and approached the cargo bay barrier. Ripley watched him with those intelligent amber eyes, tracking his movement but not responding aggressively. This creature should terrify me, he said. By all biological indicators, she is an apex predator. Yet I observe her respond to David with behaviors that suggest trust and affection. She's not a monster, David said. She's just a person who happens to be shaped differently than we are. Once I understood that, everything else became easier. That perspective is uniquely human, Dr. Nasseth observed. Sauron would see a threat. Chitauri would see a biological hazard. Humans see a potential friend. Is that really so strange? Yes, both aliens said simultaneously. The conversation continued as the transport approached the research station. They discussed the implications of David's survival, the potential applications of human empathy in exploration contexts, the questions raised about how other species might develop similar capabilities. But underneath the academic discussion ran a deeper realization. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the smartest or the most advanced or the longest lived. But they carried something unique, a capability evolved through millions of years of learning to survive on a world that threw every possible challenge at them. They carried the ability to connect, to understand, to bridge gaps between different forms of consciousness. This made them valuable in ways that the galaxy was only beginning to recognize. Where other species saw barriers, humans saw opportunities for communication. Where other species saw threats, humans saw potential allies. Where other species gave up, humans found another approach. What will you do now? Captain Breen asked David as the research station grew larger in the viewport. I'll write that report you requested. I'll work with the xenobiologists to study Ripley properly. I'll probably volunteer for another Deathworld expedition when one comes available. After nearly dying, you wish to return to dangerous environments? I didn't nearly die, David corrected. I nearly gave up, which is different. But I didn't give up. I adapted. And now I know I can handle situations that seem impossible. That's worth more than safety. Amy touched his shoulder. You scared me. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just keep surviving. Keep showing the galaxy what humans can do. David looked at Ripley again, at the massive predator who had become his partner and friend. We're not trying to prove anything, he said quietly. We're just being ourselves. If that changes how the galaxy sees humanity, then maybe the galaxy needed its perspective adjusted. The transport docked with the research station with a gentle thud. Medical teams waited to examine David, and xenobiologists waited to study Ripley. News of David's survival had spread through the station's network, and everyone wanted to understand how a human had lived 12 days in conditions that should have been instantly fatal. But David was not thinking about fame or recognition. He was thinking about the jungle that had tested him, about the creature who had trusted him, about the connection that had formed between two beings who should have been predator and prey, but became something better instead. That was the human advantage, he realized. Not strength or speed or intelligence, though humans had enough of those. The real advantage was simpler and more profound. Humans could look at the universe's infinite diversity and see family waiting to be found. They could face the unknown and respond not with fear but with curiosity and openness. The galaxy was full of wonders, and humans were uniquely equipped to meet those wonders with friendship instead of conquest. That was worth any danger. That was worth any risk. That was worth surviving for. The research station's medical bay smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. David sat on an examination table while doctors ran scanners over his body, documenting every injury, every adaptation, every change that 12 days in the jungle had carved into him. They found scars, mild malnutrition, and a collection of antibodies against toxins that should have killed him. Otherwise, he was healthy. Remarkably, impossibly healthy. Your cellular structure shows adaptations consistent with prolonged environmental stress response, the medical officer explained. She was human, which made her fascination with David's condition somehow more intense. Your body learned to process compounds we would classify as lethal. You essentially evolved in fast forward. I just ate what was available and didn't die, David said. That is significantly understating your achievement. Mr. Reeves. Down in the xenobiology section, Ripley was receiving similar attention. A team of specialists had constructed a habitat for her using data David provided about her preferences and needs. Through the viewport in the medical bay, David could see the habitat's exterior. He had insisted on visual access to her location. Separation made them both nervous. Amy appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of actual coffee, not the synthetic substitute they drank on expeditions. Thought you might need this. David accepted the cup gratefully. Real coffee. I missed this almost as much as I missed you. Almost? Amy pretended to be offended. Coffee doesn't ask difficult questions. She sat beside him, sipping her own drink. Everyone's talking about you. The station network is full of speculation about what happened. Some people think you're exaggerating. Others think you're some kind of miracle. I'm neither. I'm just a biologist who fell into a jungle and figured out how to survive. With an apex predator as your best friend. Okay. That part is slightly unusual, David admitted. Amy laughed. Then her expression became serious. They want to classify Ripley as a research subject. Permanent containment for study. David's hand tightened on his coffee cup. No, David, she's a valuable specimen. The xenobiologist could learn so much from studying her behavior, her biology, her intelligence. She's not a specimen. She's a person. And she stays with me or I stay with her. You can't fight the whole research station. Watch me. Before Amy could respond, Captain Breen entered the medical bay. His translator emitted respectful tones. Mr. Reeves, we must discuss Ripley's situation. The station director has concerns about housing a dangerous predator in a civilian research facility. Ripley is only dangerous to things that threaten her or me. She's been completely calm since we arrived. Nevertheless, regulations exist regarding exotic fauna. The director is within his authority to demand containment protocols. David slid off the examination table, ignoring the medical officer's protests that testing was not complete. Then I need to speak with the director. Now. The director's office occupied a large space with windows overlooking the station's central atrium. Director Walsh was Chithari, his multiple eyes reflecting light in patterns that indicated stress. He chittered rapidly when David entered, barely waiting for his translator to catch up. Mr. Reeves, your survival is remarkable, but you must understand the position you place us in. We cannot risk station safety for sentimental attachment to a wild animal. She's not wild. She's trained, socialized, and bonded to me. She's safer than some crew members I've met. She is a predator from a Deathworld. The classification alone requires maximum security, containment. Then I'll leave the station and take her, somewhere that understands the situation better. Director. Walsh's translator emitted sounds of distress. You cannot leave. Medical evaluation is incomplete. Your debriefing is incomplete. And frankly, Mr. Reeves, the galactic scientific community has considerable interest in your experience. You are a valuable resource. I'm a person, not a resource. And so is Ripley. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if Dr. Nasseth had not entered the office. The Sauron scientist moved with purpose, his datapad held forward like a weapon. Director Walsh, I have completed preliminary analysis of Mr. Reeves's survival data. You need to see this immediately. The director's eyes swiveled to focus on the datapad. His translator went silent as he processed what he was reading. When he finally spoke, his tone had changed from authoritative to uncertain. This data suggests extraordinary bonding capability, cross-species emotional recognition, adaptive communication frameworks. If accurate, this represents a previously undocumented aspect of human neurology. It's accurate, Dr. Nasseth confirmed, and it has implications far beyond this single incident. Mr. Reeves demonstrated abilities that could change how we approach Deathworld exploration, first contact protocols, and interspecies cooperation. You are suggesting we study him? I am suggesting we learn from him, and that requires keeping him and his companion together. Separating them would invalidate any further research into the bonding mechanism. David watched this exchange with wary hope. Scientific interest could be a blessing or a curse depending on who controlled the research. Director Walsh's mandibles worked silently for several moments. Finally, he chittered a decision. Very well. Ripley will be classified as Mr. Reeves's research partner under his personal custody. However, you will both remain on this station for a minimum observation period of 6 months. During this time, you will cooperate fully with xenobiological and psychological research teams. Agreed? Agreed, David said. As long as Ripley is treated with respect and given appropriate living conditions. Dr. Nasseth will oversee her habitat design. I trust his judgment. Thank you, Director. Walsh's translator emitted sounds that might have been amusement or might have been resignation. Thank me by not allowing your companion to eat anyone. The paperwork would be extensive. Over the following weeks, David and Ripley settled into their new routine. The habitat Dr. Nasseth designed was spacious and enriched with elements that mimicked Verdalis 7's jungle environment. David spent his days working with researchers, explaining his techniques, demonstrating his communication methods with Ripley, and writing the most detailed survival report in exploration history. The report became required reading in every expedition training program across 36 worlds. David's techniques were analyzed, debated, and gradually incorporated into standard protocols. Not everyone could replicate his success, the research teams learned. The ability to read and respond to non-human consciousness varied significantly among individuals, but knowing it was possible changed everything. Amy visited daily, bringing news from the wider galaxy. David's story had spread far beyond the research station. Human crews were reporting increased success rates in hostile environments. Other species were requesting human liaisons for their exploration teams, recognizing the unique value humans brought to interspecies contact. You've become famous, Amy told him one afternoon. They sat in Ripley's habitat, the massive predator lounging peacefully while David scratched behind her ridge plates. I don't want to be famous. I just want to do my work. Too late. The galaxy has decided you represent something important about humanity. What's that? Hope, I think. The possibility that dangerous situations can become partnerships. The idea that understanding beats violence. David considered this. That's a lot of weight for one person and one predator to carry. You're not alone, though. Other humans are following your example. There's a team on Crevasse 9 that successfully befriended a pack of ice hunters. Another group on Terminus Station made contact with void creatures that everyone thought were mindless. Your story gave them permission to try. I just survived. They're the ones being brave, Amy smiled. You showed them how to be brave. That's worth something. 6 months became 8 months, then 12. David's required observation period ended, but he chose to stay. The research station had become a hub for studying human-animal bonding, and David's expertise was valuable. More importantly, Ripley was comfortable there, and moving her would cause unnecessary stress. Captain Breen visited regularly, bringing updates from continuing exploration of Verdalis 7. The expedition had eventually completed their survey mission, armed with the survival techniques David had pioneered. They found resources that could support a research colony, possibly even a small settlement. David's initial sacrifice had led to productive outcomes. They want to name the colony after you, Captain Breen said during one visit. Absolutely not. I told them you would say that. They plan to do it anyway. Humans are stubborn about honoring their heroes. I'm not a hero. I'm a biologist who fell into a jungle. You are a person who showed the galaxy something it needed to see. Whether you accept the title of hero or not, you performed heroic actions. You survived the impossible and helped others survive as well. Dr. Nasseth published 3 papers on David's bonding mechanisms, each one expanding the scientific understanding of human consciousness. The Sauron scientist had become something close to a friend, visiting the habitat often to observe Ripley and discuss theories about interspecies communication. I still do not fully understand how you achieve this, Dr. Nasseth admitted one day. The mechanics of empathy remain elusive to non-human psychology. Maybe you're thinking too technically, David suggested. It's not about mechanics. It's about being willing to see another being as an individual worthy of respect. But how do you determine worthiness? Everyone starts worthy. You subtract worthiness only if they prove themselves harmful. Most species start by assuming nothing is worthy until proven otherwise. Humans assume everything is worthy until proven harmful. That seems dangerously naive. Sometimes. But it also means we make friends in places where others only find enemies. A year after returning from Verdalis 7, David received a communication from Earth. A training academy wanted him to develop a curriculum teaching his survival techniques to the next generation of explorers. The opportunity would mean leaving the research station, but it would also mean spreading the knowledge more widely. He discussed it with Amy over dinner in the station's dining hall. She had been promoted to senior engineer and was designing equipment specifically adapted to Deathworld conditions. "You should do it," she said. "Think of how many people you could help. How many lives you could save by teaching them what you learned." "What about Ripley? I can't bring her to Earth. Dr. Nasseth would care for her, and you could visit regularly. Besides, Earth has facilities that could give her more space than she has here." David looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. Going home meant leaving the creature who had saved his life, the partner who had taught him so much. But it also meant ensuring that what he learned could help others survive similar situations. "I'll consider it," he said finally. That night, David sat with Ripley in her habitat. The bioluminescent plants Dr. Nasseth had installed glowed softly, mimicking the jungle nights they had shared. Ripley's massive head rested in David's lap, her breathing slow and peaceful. "You know I can't stay here forever," David said quietly. Ripley's eyes opened, focusing on him with clear intelligence. "There are people who need to learn what we figured out together. About trust, about partnership, about seeing past fear to find friendship." Ripley rumbled, the sound vibrating through David's body. He had learned to interpret these sounds over their time together. This one meant understanding, acceptance, and something that might have been encouragement. "I'll come back," David promised. "Regularly. And Dr. Nasseth will take good care of you. He's learned a lot from watching us. He's becoming better at seeing individuals instead of just specimens." They sat together in comfortable silence, human and predator, two beings who should have been enemies but had become family instead. The galaxy was slowly learning the lesson they represented. Connection was possible across any divide. Understanding was achievable between any species. Trust could be built even in the most hostile circumstances. Humans carried this capability like a gift, one that Earth's harsh conditions had crafted over millions of years. They brought empathy to the stars, friendship to the void, and the possibility of partnership to encounters that other species approached with fear and weapons. 3 months later, David stood in a transport preparing to return to Earth. Through the viewport, he could see Ripley in her expanded habitat. She had grown accustomed to his regular departures and returns. She watched him with calm acceptance, trusting that he would keep his promises. Amy stood beside him, having negotiated a transfer to Earth to continue their work together. Captain Breen had transmitted his farewells, noting that David's report had been incorporated into Chithari expedition protocols. Dr. Nasseth had promised daily updates on Ripley's well-being and expressed gratitude for everything David had taught him about seeing beyond surfaces. "Ready to go home?" Amy asked. David looked at the stars, at the infinite possibilities they represented, at the countless worlds waiting to be explored and understood. He thought about the students he would teach, the explorers he would train, the partnerships that would form because someone showed them it was possible. "Ready," he confirmed. The transport departed, carrying David away from the research station toward Earth. But he left behind something more valuable than his physical presence. He left proof that humans possessed a special capability, a way of seeing the universe that transformed dangers into opportunities and enemies into friends. The galaxy was vast and often hostile, but it was also full of beings waiting to be understood, waiting to be recognized, waiting for someone to look past threat and see individual consciousness worthy of respect. Humans excelled at this recognition. They carried empathy like a torch into the darkness, and everywhere they went, they lit the possibility of connection. David Reeves had survived 12 days in a Deathworld jungle not through strength or technology, but through the uniquely human gift of seeing another being's pain and responding with compassion. That gift was spreading now, taught to new explorers, inspiring new approaches, changing how the galaxy thought about survival and connection. The jungle had tested him. The predator had trusted him. And together they had taught the galaxy something it desperately needed to learn. In a universe of endless diversity, the greatest strength was not the ability to conquer or control, but the willingness to understand and befriend. That was humanity's contribution to the stars. Not weapons or technology, though they had those. Not colonization or exploitation, though they could do those if needed. Instead, they offered something more profound and more valuable. They offered the possibility that any being from any world could become family if approached with openness and respect. David looked out at the stars one final time before entering sleep cycle for the long journey. Somewhere among those distant lights on worlds not yet discovered, future explorers would face their own impossible situations. And because of what he had lived and shared, they would have one additional tool for survival. They would know that reaching out in friendship was not weakness but strength. They would know that empathy was not sentiment but strategy. They would know that the most dangerous creature could become the most devoted companion. The galaxy was learning, and humans were teaching, not through force or dominance but through example and invitation. That was enough. That was everything. That was how one person and one predator had changed the future, one connection at a time.